I said to myself, nothing has changed. We're just going around in circles. The same kind of issues that we're facing now that we think are so controversial and unique occurred 100 years ago.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Collapse Life podcast. I'm Zahra Sethna, your host, and I'm very excited to introduce you to our next guest. If you're a Zero Hedge reader, and I suspect much of the Collapse Life audience is, you'll know our guest as one of the most prolific visual satirists. His searing social and political commentary is one of the reasons millions of people keep coming back to that news site. William Banzai has been a fixture on Zero Hedge from essentially day one, and we're incredibly thrilled to welcome him and his art to our studio today. Bill is a native New Yorker who now lives in Hong Kong, and when he's not making incredible art, he gives unique walking tours of the city. We're so happy to welcome him to the podcast today to talk about the power of art to speak truth to power and what inspires him. Welcome, Bill. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate it very much.
It's fantastic. So I want to start with just a... people are going to be so excited to see you. So let's start a little with a little bit of your story. So you weren't always an artist, and I don't want to go into too much detail about your previous life and your career, but just tell us what inspired you to start creating satirical art.
Okay. In a nutshell, I'm an American citizen. I was born in a military base in Japan. My mother was Japanese, so multicultural. I was raised in New York City. When I was in high school, I lived abroad. I graduated in international school, so I've been an international person all my life. I went to law school. I was a lawyer. I was a very successful lawyer. Later in life, after being a lawyer for many years, I decided that I wanted to go in a different direction, more or less. Sounds like it was planned. It wasn't. I re-scrambled my life. I was always a photographer. When I was young, people thought I was going to wind up being an artist. So I had this innate ability. I can tell you that the first job that I ever got when I was 14 years old, I mean, by job, I mean not interning, being paid. I got it as a result of using my camera. I got into this thing where I lived near the water in New York City, and I for school, I went around and I took pictures of all the pollution, which was terrible back then. And I did a class report, and then I did it at Sunday school and showed it to them. And the guy who was running the Sunday school class, turns out, was someone who was an environmental engineer. And they were in the middle of doing a study of Jamaica Bay in New York City. I said, "You want a job?" And so I wound up doing this other thing that was like really a great summer job. And I wasn't using my camera. I was working in laboratories and taking set. But I tell people, the first job I ever got, I got because of my camera, Anyway, all through life, wow. I was, I do a lot of different things. I like making music. In fact, I tell people I think like a musician. But, I was always a photographer. And then rolling into the last financial crisis, I was in the middle of changing my life around, I thought, slightly, and then the market blew up, and I basically said, I'm going in a completely different direction. I don't want anything to do with finance and Wall Street anymore. And I had time to think about what I was doing. Well, I was playing around on the computer, and then it's when I started doing different kinds of satire. I was doing song lyrics, I was rewriting poems, and that was, on all kinds of Deal Book and Financial Times and Business Week, which gave me this accolade as being one of their top 100 most influential readers or this or that, because I was constantly posting stuff on Business Week. That was before Business Week really went. But anyway, and then I became aware of Zero Hedge, so I'm one of the first joiners of Zero Hedge, and I started posting links into the comment streams in Zero Hedge, which I learned a lot from Zero Hedge. I learned a lot, not because Tyler Durden is a genius, which he is, in my opinion, but also back then there were all kinds of other geniuses who were constantly posting in the threads under the the news items that he was doing. And that's when I learned when I read, I absorb a lot. And you can go through all life on Wall Street as someone who's a lawyer or whatever and not really understand what's going on. So I don't expect most people on the street to understand what's going on, because most people who walk on Wall Street don't even understand what the heck is going on. They don't have time to ask,
For sure.
why is the Federal Reserve doing this? They're just reacting to what's happening because they got to do a trade and make money.
Right.
Yeah? No one's thinking deep and saying, what is the overall impact of this? Is it a good thing? Or this? So that was the first time in my life when I actually had an opportunity to listen to people who, and it wasn't only Tyler Durden, there were lots of people posting back then. And there still are now, but this was all new,
Yeah.
And I first thought I thought, oh, I'm going to start blogging, And then I just realized, I'm writing these things and so that 7 people can look at it in, a week or what, it's like a waste of time. It's not getting through. And then I said, I'm going to try something else. Since I'm a photographer and I follow technical developments in photography, something I just like doing, just like buying guitars or anything else. It's like, you got to know what's going on. I taught myself Photoshop very early on, but as a photographer. But then I said, all right, I'm going to start doing satire aimed at some of these people who really deserve it, like Ben Bernanke or whoever. And that people like that. And I said, this all makes a lot of sense to me, because when you read about brain science, they tell you that the human brain has mainly evolved in a way that emphasizes visual, what you see. Yeah, we have these other senses, but mainly what you see is what, for humans, it's different to all different creatures, but for humans, what you see really has a lot to do with how you react and how your whole brain is constructed. So I said to myself, this makes sense. That's it.
Absolutely.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, it's biological. And so I started doing pictures. I always, when I was a kid, I was a class clown. I'm happy to admit that, I was one of these people who had fun making people laugh, So, yeah, I liked George Carlin very early on. I was young, and a lot of other people. And so I just took that kind of satire, that kind of wit, and combined it with pictures, which I then reconstructed myself using Photoshop. And it, I don't have to say, when I was counting page views of my pictures, I got to over 200 million. And then I said, I'm not, because I was I was posting my pictures on Zero Hedge, and that's really the main place that I post. That's the only place now that I post.
For those of us who are familiar with your work, it very much stands out and has its own unique look. How would you describe your style?
How would I describe my style? Well, obviously it's political satire, but the look, if you're talking about the aesthetic look, is influenced by my photography. People, if you look at my Flickr, my photography's there too. The colors and the lighting, it's sort of gritty, and that's my photography. And so that's my aesthetic. And there's a couple of things that make it look the way it looks. And it's not like it started this way, because in the beginning, I go back and look at some of the things I did. I said, well, that was a slap job. I didn't know what I was doing. At one point, I knew I had the creative ability to just keep generating. People said, God, this guy's prolific. And they thought that I was like sitting around for hours every day doing this, and I wasn't. I had other things to worry about. I had family to worry about. I had myself, I had a life. So this was sort of like an armchair thing, just for fun. Okay, I don't watch TV. I read books.
Mm-hmm.
I do this. I have, I play music. I do, and I said to myself at one point, like 1 or 2 years, after 1 or 2 years of doing this, I really need to worry about technically whether this is satisfactory to me. And so how am I going to do this? I never, as much as I know about Photoshop, I never read the manual. I can't stand the manual. I can't stand watching videos of people telling you how to use things. I have to just play around and learn how to use them. And then I found this thing called freakingnews.com, which no longer exists. It's a sad story, but Freaking News was a place where people who styled themselves as Photoshop digital artists would challenge each other. Freaking News would do these challenges. They'd say, here's a photograph, take this car and do something with it, or take this photograph and do something with it. And everybody would work on it for a week. That's working on it for a week. And then you would post the picture. I couldn't do it. A couple of times I said, all right, I'm going to leave it on my computer for a week and play around with it a little bit, this and that. I could never do that. It's just, I don't have the patience for that. But then you would post it, and this whole group of people who were posting the pictures would critique your picture. Not the content necessarily, but whether you were shading it properly or whether you're cutting it things right, or, is the lighting, did you miss the, really looking at the picture and saying, oh, you did this right. Constructive criticism. And that's when all of a sudden I really learned. And I'm not going to say that everything that I learned I constantly am obsessed with doing, because a lot of times I don't have the time to do everything that, but that's why you're not going to look at one of my pictures and where it looks like someone just cut a face and just slapped it onto another body and doesn't, I'm going to pay attention to whether or not everything is shaded properly, the skin tone matches the skin tone on the body. If I'm going to move objects around in the background, I'm going to make sure it looks seamless so that, if I really spend a lot of time on a room picture and put someone in there, I can really manipulate things so that it looks like it's real,
So, yeah, you talked about the wit and the humor, and many of your pieces are laugh out loud funny, but some of them are also quite dark and deal with really serious social and political issues. So I just wanted to ask, how do you choose what to focus on? And are there any subjects that you won't deal with, or any lines that you won't cross?
I spent in the beginning, during different periods, for example, like COVID. Oh, we all had a lot of time. I'm just like sitting at the computer, just looking at pictures, okay, looking at or reading, and deciding, for myself what I think is going on. And I will not engage in, ad hominem attacks unless I think someone deserves it. Okay. And
Right.
I'm not going to pick a target and say, all right, this is my pet target. Like some said, if you look at the history of satire, there are different artists who had like a thing going with this king or that mayor or this or that. I don't have that. I don't. It's just not me. I don't have. They bore me. In the end, they'll bore me. But which actually there's some of
Right.
these people in the last, since that last crisis, who just kept appearing and appearing and appearing, and every time, it's like I'm not going to let it go. It's not like I'm going to do a funny picture of you and make fun of you and then let you go next week when you do something else that's completely outrageous. I'm going to hit you every time. If I think you deserve it,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it slip by. And so I know in your
Right.
email, you ask, how do you choose your subjects? It's very simple. If I spent all day searching for subjects, I wouldn't have time to do other things that I love doing. So that's why I use Zero Hedge, because all I need to do,
Yeah.
look at the front page, scroll down the screen, decide what interests me, what interests me. They are going to, he is, or they, or he, or what, it'll be there. Whatever I need to know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to have to go through pages and pages of republished
Yeah.
articles. He chooses, he curates. Is he creating everything?
Right.
No, he's curating. He's saying the readers of the
Right.
platform are going to be interested in this. Okay. And there are all kinds of different readers of the platform.
Yeah.
Not a political website necessarily. It's actually a financial website. And when I look
Yeah.
and I've met, as a result of other things that I do, I've met quite a few people who look at that website for finance. Okay, that's what brought them there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not still just silver stackers or gold. They're people who
Mm.
professionals, yeah, in the business.
Yeah. Sophisticated investors for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And like you said, I mean, during some of these recent crises, there are pretty clear villains. And so, Ben Bernanke features heavily in your work from the 2008 financial crisis. And, there's lots of Anthony Fauci. There's,
right. There's some of them who are evil villains, just like in the
yeah.
old days, but some of these people like Fauci, okay, it's not like I looked at Dr. Fauci in the beginning and said, oh, he's an evil genius, I'm going to go after him. It's like, I'm watching, I'm experiencing COVID like everybody else. And, but I'm not going to be spoon fed. I'm going to, my principal problem with what happened there was that people should be allowed to make their own medical decisions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, in the end, when our president said on TV, we need to vaccinate the unvaccinated to protect the vaccinated. Well, I'm not a medical doctor, but I pride myself sort of being as a logical thinker. And when I heard that, I said, you people are nuts. Fauci all of a sudden became, and,
Yeah.
I live out here in Asia. Masks, it's true. When I was a kid in Japan, people wear masks during flu season. So the whole idea of masking wasn't something that I felt was, necessarily unusual. But what I thought was unusual
Mm-hmm.
was suddenly having people tell you, you must wear your mask, you know. Okay, in public
Right.
places, but then they're telling you you need to wear them in the car, you need to wear them at home, and this and that. Kids need to wear them. Kids can't go to school, and all these other, social, you know, um, issues that basically got swept under the rug. And now, yeah, we have a whole. It's not a generation, but if you think of 4 years as being a segment of your educational life, we have a whole, you know we have a lot of people who basically went through that period of life when you become social adjusted by interacting with your peers in school, who did it with masks and weren't allowed to go to school and had to do it on TV
Yeah.
screens. What kind of socially adjusted people are these going to wind up being later? I don't know. And I don't think the people that made those decisions cared. Okay. And now they all hide. Oh, it was an
Right.
emergency. I mean, so when I see that, that becomes a subject for my artwork. People in power are trying to impose their will on the free will of others, and that is what really, if you
Yeah.
look at what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. I didn't like it when I was a kid. I didn't like my teachers telling me. I had a problem with being ordered around and say, do this, do that. That does not work in my life. And one of the
Right.
reasons why I love my country is, what's said in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. That's what makes us what we are. I don't believe that we should be telling the rest of the world that
Mm-hmm.
they need to be that way. I believe in non-interference. I think everybody should be able to decide for themselves how they want to govern them. So that means that I really don't like neoconism. I don't like what our intelligence apparatus, or whatever you want to call security intelligence apparatus, which all the great powers have. But I just look at what we do around the rest of the world, and I just think that we're being led by a coterie of hypocrites that, think that, for
Yeah.
lots of different reasons they can do whatever they want. So that winds up being a subject. That winds up being a prevalent subject. But how do I choose the images? I'm just following the chronology. If you look at my Flickr chronologically through my Flickr
Mhm.
stream, you can see everything that happened in the last 12, 14 years. I'm just following the news on Zero Hedge. If you can't get into it now, but if you looked at everything I ever posted on Zero Hedge, I'm basically following what I see happening. And some things I'll just say, that deserves a picture. And then, so does that mean I'm sitting for hours trying to figure out what picture? No, I just look at something and say, I don't like that. Or, And then I'll just be walking around doing what everybody else does, shopping for groceries, this or that, and something spitting back here. When I was a kid, my parents had subscriptions to certain magazines like Life magazine, Time magazine, and my dad would have to, who, by the way, my dad was someone who taught me not only photography, but books. He created my love for books.
Mhm.
My mom influenced me other ways, but I'd grab that magazine when I got home from school, get out a big pen, and I'd start putting mustaches on everybody's face. Or, dressing them up, just drawing over, that's what I did, you know. Then I became a Mark Slaughter and I did other things, on Subway Car, but I won't get into that. But, I mean, um, that's what kids do. And
Yeah.
that it, it, it turned into satire. And then I would do it in school too, by the way. And I would make pictures and then I would leave them in the hallway or I'd post them on the wall with pictures of teachers or principals or, And so I was always doing.
So this is just an evolution of something that
Yeah, and then I
started a long
stopped.
time
I
ago.
became a serious person with a career and a family and this and that. But then,
Yeah.
uh, so it's sort of like second nature to me. And 260 million views and thousands of pictures, as you know, that I've done that are all there and they're for free. I decided early on I'm not going to be a copyright Nazi because basically I'm taking other
Mhm.
pictures and I'm putting my own stamp on it and I'm playing around with it.
Right.
And so, there is a copyright principle of fair use.
Right.
If you're using other pictures not for profit, but that are copyrighted, I generally try to
Mhm.
stay in the public domain. Um, but
Yeah.
anyway, if all you're doing is political artwork, then no one can really the case law has evolved to the point now. AI is stealing everybody. Everybody's artwork is being stolen by AI.
We had asked you to pull out a couple of pieces of your work that we could talk a little bit more about in detail. And you sent us a couple. So let's go through one or two of those and you can tell us what was the story behind it? What were you thinking when you made it?
It just so happens that these old pucks I enjoyed very much because nothing has changed. We're just going around in circles. The same kind of issues that we're facing now that are so we think are so controversial and unique occurred 100 years ago, and there really isn't too much that needs to be done except updating the faces and the captions and maybe changing things around, adding, like there's Alan Green's campaign down there in the corner. Look at this picture, you see the angles of the faces and everything, the way I spent time trying to choose funny the expressions that I wanted and getting them to fit into these other bodies. Okay, this is Robin Hood and his merry men.
Yeah.
And then redoing the lyrics from the original um, issue of Puck. Yeah, that's the lyrics underneath, but updating them to the current situation. All these guys here, except for Jamie Dimon, they've all disappeared into the woodwork. Isn't that funny? They vanished. That's how it works. They get in there, they do their thing,
Yeah.
and everything collapses. And no one's held accountable. And you think they're all living in the poorhouse? No, they're not living in the poorhouse. They all land somewhere else
No.
where they're not in the limelight anymore. And it's like people forget who they are, and they think, "Phew, that was a close call." No one is chasing Ben Bernanke or Tim Geithner or Hank Paulson or
Exactly.
no one is giving them a hard time for what happened, right? They're sitting on some island, with their, margaritas or whatever, enjoying themselves on a yacht or I don't know. Yeah. Everybody else has to live with the consequences. And this is another one where, Uncle Sam's nightmare. This was from about 8 years ago, I think, where I just took what was going on and I put it into the picture and I updated Uncle Sam's nightmare. And yeah, a lot of people like this picture. I like this picture.
And this is what I mean, because there are amusing elements to it, but it's also very dark. It's very deep. It's very serious as well.
Yeah, well, the original picture was dark, deep, and serious. Things were, we were facing challenges as a country, and Uncle Sam, who was created by Thomas Nast, by the way, Uncle Sam wakes up in the middle of the night and he looks at what's going on. He says, "What the heck happened?" He wakes up into a nightmare. And there are these different themes that are covered that just keep getting worse, in my opinion. Okay, we're really going down a road. There are people in power who think that whatever they think is their end is justified by any means. And do whatever they want. Okay, we don't need to have freedom of speech. That's the one that that's the big hot button right now, and I appreciate everything that Elon Musk is doing to try to, fight with that. But I don't know, where we're going to wind up with this, because unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people. A, there are a lot of people who don't care. B, there are a lot of people who have not been taught why it is so important. And the younger, millennial or whatever generation Z or this, I lose count, but who don't appreciate it. And I tell people, well, you got to get into their frame of mind. This is a generation of youngsters who, in my opinion, have been, okay, they were told one thing and it turned out not to be true. And they're living with the consequences. It's not their fault, okay? They did what they were told, and the opportunity's not there for them. They're not going to be able to live the same kind of a lifestyle. They don't really think too much about, they just think, something's not right. And if you disagree with me, then and you need to be squelched, and and someone decides that that's what's necessary. They're not going to argue about that. They're not arguing. There's some of them who think that's a good thing, and that's what makes me kind of pessimistic, because there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of
get older,
there's been a lot of demoralization of younger generations.
Yeah, there's, as I said, there are a lot of people who don't care, because you wonder who's coming into the country. There are a lot of people who are coming into the country who are coming from places where you don't have any rights. You don't have freedom. Forget it. You don't. And they're thinking, my God, this is the land of the free. For them, it is. Okay? So it's not an issue for them. The issue for them is, I got to get a job, put food on the table. I got a family, or I want to have a family. That's what they're thinking, right?
Yeah.
They really don't. No one ever taught them about, the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or the Founding Fathers or anything that's part of the cultural, political fabric that created, what most of us that I hang around with, and yourselves, we love our country.
Yeah. That's one of the themes of your art that I love actually is you have a whole series of pictures about the founding fathers in interesting circumstances. You have George Washington, and this one we
The
love,
spirit of
this
'76. Yeah, the trucker.
Spirit of 76.
Yeah, Canada is like
Yeah.
well on its way. I don't know what's going to happen in Canada, but what they did to those truckers and what they did to the people who wanted to support those truckers was an outrage. Yeah, and when the American truckers wanted to
Yeah.
support those truckers, you know, what was being said about them and what was being done and threatened to them was disgusting.
Mhm.
That's what made me do this picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it was. A lot of people love this picture.
It's
They love,
definitely one of the favorites.
yeah,
There's another one that's the scene from Fight Club with
with Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and then I have this other picture of Thomas Jefferson where I changed his facial expression and it's him saying, "What the fuck?" Right? People love my Thomas Jefferson, "What the fuck?" Uh, because he'd be looking at a lot of things and saying, "What the fuck is going on?" Yeah. I'm not saying that these
for
people
sure.
were model human beings, but they were incredibly smart in and you can't just point to one of these guys and say, "Oh, it was him." It was a cocktail of, there was
Mhm.
negotiation, and how did they finally arrive at the compromises that created those founding documents? When and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I'm smart enough because it's one of the things that made me decide that maybe I want to be a lawyer. A certain kind of genius went into how to create a system of governance that was designed basically to deal with tyranny. Yeah, there's the. I love that picture too. Every
Yeah.
now and then I have to update it. Someone said I need to put Trump in the picture, and as you know, I haven't.
Not in this one, but you do have a whole bunch of
Yeah,
pictures around
but
Trump.
I don't. I have pictures around. I have pictures around everybody, but people try to say, "Oh, you're a Trumpster." I said, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." When Michael Moore said, that these people are going to pick, I think he said that they're going to pick up a hand grenade and throw it because they're angry and no one is listening to them. I understand. When he finally said that, I said, "Man, what happened to this guy?" So now all of a sudden he gets it. All of my life, I was someone, not because I'm from New York City, but I felt I was progressive. Okay. But I was also a freedom of speech
Right.
absolutist. Okay. I felt I was progressive. Did I feel I was progressive? I said, I think there are certain costs involved in living in a harmonious society, and there are things that need to be attended to simply because not everybody has the same wherewithal and resources or, cultural background or whatever you want to say. Some people are underprivileged in the sense that they need help. And I always thought those people who need help should be helped,
Okay.
right? I always thought that. I wasn't a leftist, okay? And it was, if you came to me the beginning, like around 2000, right around 9/11, I was absolutely appalled with what was going on. It was Republicans that were running the country, right? I hated George W. Bush. It wasn't even him. It was Cheney that, these people, and then the Patriot Act, and then on and on and on. And it was sort of like, yeah, I would make fun of him. I was making back, way back when I was making fun of his wig and this, because I'm a New Yorker. New Yorkers know Donald Trump. Okay, I mean, New Yorkers
Yeah.
know real New Yorkers. I'm not talking about people who arrived there for Google or Facebook. I'm thinking about people who grew up in New York and people who are New Yorkers on the street. Okay, they know who Donald Trump is. Okay, they know who Donald Trump is.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is not a racist. Okay, he may be a lot of other things. He's a narcissist. I mean, I couldn't listen to that whole thing the other night. Um, I just I got in and then I said, okay, it's him. I don't have to listen to it anymore. It's like, He goes on and on. I guess maybe it's because, like me, maybe it's New York thing. You can go on and on about yourself. Oh, Kim Jong-un, he's my, I get along well with him. Oh, I get along well with Putin. I did this, I did that. Okay,
Yeah,
he is
yeah,
a mensch. He's a guy who
yeah,
who can shoot the shit. People like him. Yeah, when they meet him, that's true.
yeah.
Um, and he's being made out. When people say he's Adolf Hitler, I say, you are fucking nuts if you think he's Adolf Hitler. Yeah. So I said, just pick some pictures out and see what I say. This guy, I can't even remember his name anymore. I don't. How he wound
Yeah.
up in the role that he wound up in and then he winds up being not someone who is a cross-dresser or whatever he is, however he identifies himself. He's a luggage thief in the airport. He's a luggage thief. Say,
Yeah. Yeah. Everything else aside.
I travel. I don't like luggage thieves at the airport.
Yeah.
I used to like um, Mad Magazine. Okay, they were not
Hmm.
doing photoshopping. They were really good artists. Yeah, but then if you go back to the turn of the last century and look at what they were doing, they did. People call them cartoons. I say, cartoon is really not. Cartoon is a word that's sort of like a cartoon. It's a very simple kind of image. You know, these people, like if you look at Puck
Mm.
magazine, these are people who are real artists. They're doing pictures that have all kinds of detail and I know because I have to go back to these pictures that have all these little details that are a lot of times the things that are written there that have nothing to do with today. I have to try to get them out so I can change them around. They really loaded the pictures up with all
Mm.
kinds of nuance and this and that. I like that. I like so if I have something in the front that's funny and makes people guffaw or spit their coffee all over the computer screen, that's the initial reaction, but then you go to the next level, and if it's not evident from the content, the upfront content, what I'm getting at, you're going to go to the next level. You're going to see I'm sticking little things back there in the background, and I love doing that. I love
Yeah.
doing that photographically. I love doing that in a picture. I love, like there's one where I have a picture of Joe Biden in his basement. It's like this basement cluttered with all kinds of junk. It's like one of these games where you have to circle everything, find this, find that, It's like you can. I will go into a picture like that and put all kinds of little things in there. Um, I know people like that. So um, a lot of people say, Bill, you're the guy who invented political memes. I say, well, I don't know. Political meme technically could be, it's not something new. When we talk about memes, we're talking about now what people do on computer screens. But political memeing is something that's been going on for,
Yeah.
hundreds of years. But I will look, what I don't like doing is something that someone's already done. I'm going to go home and I'm going to look, and I'm going to, use whatever search menus I use to figure out what's been done. And if I don't think that something's been done properly or adequately, I'll redo it my way so that it meets my specifications.
We've seen in recent years kind of a death of comedy. People have become so easily offended that comedians are worried about getting canceled, and the kind of, you mentioned George Carlin earlier, and the kind of things that he and his ilk used to say are
Carlin is a guy who he sat around and did a lot of thinking. Any of these people that Frank Zappa, I mean,
Mhm.
these are people who it's not enough for them to just do what they do, which is, make people laugh or do music that's brilliant. It's like they have time to sit around and they're like us. You sit around and you're thinking, And of course, now we're talking about people who are genius. You're looking at what a genius is saying after he's thought about
Yeah.
it. And so that level of, because Zappa, even though he didn't say I'm a comedian, he was a comedian. Okay, he was a comedian. He would say things that are extremely funny. His music was funny. His lyrics are funny, but yeah, he's an entertainer. He's an artist. An artist, it's like I said, Joni Mitchell before. Artists. They're creative people who use their creative ability to, you know, either entertain other people or send a message. People are worried about being disenfranchised. If you're struggling and you really want to move ahead in life as a comedian, for example, it's got to be very difficult if you're going to stand up and you're going to say things that people, you know, want to deplatform you for saying that. It ain't going to be a life. It's not going to be a living, right? That no one's going to want to take care of you. No one is going to give you a platform to stand up. No, if you're messaging, you know, that's just the way it is, and it's not for me to pass judgment on on people but look at who are the successful people who think they're like Colbert. He thinks he's funny. It's a guy who basically gets where he goes because he gives the message that they want him to give, and then they stamp it and say that's funny.
Yeah. So what message do you have for younger artists who maybe do want to comment on the social and political issues that they see, but are still trying to find their voice? It's harder when you're younger. What message do you have for them?
If you're a young person and you're struggling now, like I said, they're struggling. You've got some experience, and and you want to express yourself. Unfortunately, first of all, the expression "struggling artist" is an expression that you know has a historical reason. Why do we call them struggling artists? Because they're struggling. It's not easy to make money as an artist. So I say to people, you can be an artist, but you don't necessarily have to be thinking of that as how you're going to put your meals on the table. Okay? And people say then they have to go and get what's called a day job. I say, well, when we were cavemen, we all had day jobs, didn't we? We didn't have time to make pictures. It was only later that we started drawing pictures of elks or whatever on the wall in caves or whatever, right? You got to worry about feeding yourself and, staying healthy and taking care of the people around you. That's what you got to do. You're going to say, well, I'm going to do that by making pictures. I say, well, good luck to you. God bless you. Maybe you can, you know? So I say, don't give up. Whatever you're doing, don't say, well, now that's past. I'm going to give up. Keep it up, but find another way to get through. And maybe sometime later you become famous.
I know you're very humble, so you may not like this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What kind of legacy do you hope to leave through your art? How do you hope to be remembered?
I don't worry about legacy. I'm William Banzai 7. There's no birth certificate that says William Banzai 7. Like Buckaroo Banzai. If people know who Buckaroo Banzai is, they'll know why I picked Banzai 7. Not because of Banzai, it's Buckaroo Banzai. That's why you see me, I'm always wearing a hat. Usually it's a cowboy hat, style hat. I have lots of friends in Texas. Texas, I tell them, they say, Bill, you should move to Texas. Texas is a state of mind. They look at me and say, yep, you understand Texas. Anyway, what I want is for someone to dig up one of these pictures that I printed off, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years from now, and look at that and say, what was going on back then? I don't know what the future is going to be. I don't pretend to be one of these people who can predict the future. And when someone finds that picture and says what was going on or this or that, maybe that will light a flame. Who knows? We could be living in darkness, 30 years from now. Maybe that will influence somebody, positively to try to deal with whatever darkness is falling.
I think that's a pretty incredible legacy.
Yeah, it is, but I don't think of it as legacy. I just could be, all these things are stored on Flickr, and we could have some kind of a lightning storm or whatever, everything gets erased.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or some AI gets programmed to erase everything, or you don't know what's going to happen. So,
You do have prints though, right? It's not all digital.
there are lots of prints floating around. People have them, and they will give them. Unfortunately now, and I know this. That's why I don't really try to sell prints or even books. People don't need to be loaded down with junk when they can't afford to live in a house. They want to be mobile. They don't want to be. They live. They're living on their phone or their laptop looking for this or that. They don't want possessions anymore. So where are these pictures going to wind up? It's like if you have a house that's full of, I bought this in Tahiti or I bought this when I was in Hong Kong. You can have it when I go. The kids will look at it and say, I don't want it. I don't want it. So who knows where these things are going to wind up? So if it's going to be a legacy at all, it's going to be a digital legacy. And look, I look at Thomas Nass, or I look at these old pucks or this, that. Do I think that there are millions of other people doing the same thing I'm doing? No, there aren't. Basically, if you wanted to distill what I do down to its essence, people ask me, they say, Bill, you make fun of the Republicans. You make fun. You got this uniparty thing where you say there's no difference between one and the other, which is where Carlin went to. I could not understand initially, because at one phase in life he was just a guy who made me laugh, and I understood his humor. I laughed, but later in life he became more, I don't want to say profound, but someone much more intelligent in terms of what his message, what he was trying to say to people when he said it's one big club and he did that whole monologue. Why isn't this guy out there trying to make things change? And he just said, I'm basically a spectator. I'm not going to make a change. It's like you can fight. You can say I'm going to fight and fight to try to deal with these injustices that are being served up by people who are elitists and don't care about anything. If you think they care about this or that, social justice, this, they don't. All they care about is money.
Well, we're so incredibly grateful that you make that art for us and make us ask those questions. And truly, from all of us at the Collapse Life team, we are just incredibly grateful and honored that you came and spent this time with us.
Well, it's been my pleasure. We spoke previously, and I enjoyed that conversation as well. And as you can tell, I like talking to people, and it's one of the reasons why I enjoy posting on Zero Hedge, because I enjoy interacting with the people in the comment threads, even though I don't always react. I used to in the very beginning. I said I'm going to react to every comment. I used to write something on every comment. I don't have the time to do that anymore, but I read every comment. I read every comment. And, when I engage in conversation with people, I enjoy that. And so the way I'm going to end this is I'm going to just say to everybody who's followed what I do for all these years, either by posting there in the comments or sitting at home and looking at what I'm doing and laughing, I appreciate very much that you've taken the time to look at what I've done. And anyone who wants to meet me, if you convince me that it's safe to meet with you, I'm happy to meet with you. So it's not like I'm someone who's an ogre hiding somewhere. Thank you very much to everybody.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Bill. Absolutely. What an absolute thrill to talk to a legend like Bill. If you enjoyed this as much as we did, please like and share this video, and make sure you subscribe to this channel to get all the latest updates from us. Collapse Life is all about opening eyes and giving people tools to take control of their lives. Every week we publish new stories on Substack at collapselife.substack.com, and you can also find us on Twitter at collapse_life. Plus, we have some great products in our Collapse Life store, so please check that out. And then head back here next week for another episode of this podcast. We'll have another amazing guest lined up, and we look forward to seeing you. Until then, keep your chin up. It's only Collapse. See you soon.